Cascade Memorial was quiet now, not silent. Hospitals never were, but hushed in that eerie way only night shift nurses understood. The machine still beeped, the fluorescent lights still hummed, and someone in the ER was definitely still vomiting. But for Janelle Brooks, her part was done. For now. Her back ached like she carried bricks instead of people. Her feet, stuffed into scrub-worn sneakers, felt like they were made of cement. She'd been moving since 6:45 a.m. First a full shift in the trauma ward, then a surprise second shift because someone on night duty no-showed. But she didn't complain. Black single moms didn't get to complain. They endured, quietly, efficiently, unseen, unless something went wrong. She pushed through the hospital's automatic doors at 11:39 p.m., exhaled into the cool Arizona air and muttered, "Almost home." Her 2010 Dodge Dart waited for her, like an old friend that might break down at any minute. It had survived 2 relocations, a divorce, and both of her twin sons vomiting in the back seat on different occasions. It deserved retirement, but tonight it had one last job. Get her back to South Cottonwood Lane, where Malik and Marcus were hopefully asleep at Mrs. Lindell's. She turned the ignition and the engine sputtered, caught, and growled to life. That was a small miracle. But then, blink, blink, that damn gaslight. "Of course," she whispered. "Of course it's tonight." She pulled out of the parking lot, muscles tense, and began scanning for the closest open station. There weren't many at this hour in Dry Creek, Arizona. A sleepy desert town most people passed through on the way to Flagstaff. But Dry Creek had its shadows. And its silence. About 6 minutes into the drive, she spotted it. A Shell station on the corner of Eastbridge and Jensen. Half-lit, one overhead flickering. A dented sign that still said, "Open 24 hours," in fading red letters. No other cars in sight. It looked like a place that time forgot. Janelle pulled in slowly, her fingers tight on the steering wheel. Her body ached to go home, shower, collapse into bed. But she knew better than to rush. Especially at night. Especially looking like she did. Scrubs wrinkled, hospital badge clipped to her top, brown skin shining with the day's sweat. She eased up next to pump 4, her favorite number, not that it mattered now. The area around the pumps was quiet except for faint buzzing of old fluorescent lights. She left the engine running. Her car had a nasty habit of not restarting if turned off when hot. Janelle sat for a second longer before moving. Let the night wrap around her. Let her mind return from the chaos of the ICU. She reached for her wallet, pulled her debit card out with trembling fingers, and glanced around the lot out of habit. A couple of plastic snacks, wrappers blew past near the curb. No one else. She stepped out, the way of the day following her, and slid the card into the reader. The screen blinked. "Please enter PIN." She paused. That's when she saw it. Bright white headlights flaring in her rear view. A sharp turn. Dust kicked up. A sheriff's cruiser swung in fast behind her. Tires scraping the edge of the parking lot. She turned her head. Another cruiser pulled in from the side, angling itself to block her from the exit. What the hell? Her stomach tightened. 2 deputies stepped out. One from each car. Early 30s, both white, both with hands resting on their belts. One had a flashlight already unholstered. Their uniforms were standard-issue Coconino County tan, but their presence wasn't routine. This wasn't a traffic stop. This felt practice. "Ma'am," the taller one said, approaching slowly, light train on her chest. "Need to see your license and registration." She blinked, squinting against the beam. "Excuse me? Is there a problem, officer?" "We got a call about a suspicious vehicle matching this description," he said without missing a beat. "Just need to verify the car's not stolen." "Suspicious?" Her hand instinctively raised, pointing toward her chest. "I just got off work at Cascade Memorial. I'm a trauma nurse. My ID's right here." The badge glinted under his flashlight, but he didn't look at it. "License and registration. Now." She nodded slowly. "Okay." No sudden moves. No attitude. Just comply. Her wallet was on the passenger seat. She turned, made sure both hands were visible, and reached across the cabin. Her heart pounded. Not because she was guilty, but because she knew being black and tired in public could still be seen as a threat. She grabbed a wallet, flipped it open, handed over her ID. My registration is in the glove compartment. The second officer, shorter and stockier, stepped closer to the passenger side. What's your business here? I needed gas, she replied. The station's still open. I live 10 minutes from here. My kids are home with a sitter. He nodded, not writing anything down, just watching. Then he leaned slightly, peeking into the back seat. His eyes locked onto the car seat, covered with a Paw Patrol blanket. You got someone with you? He asked. No, Janelle said firmly. Just me? A beat of silence. Then the taller one spoke again. Pop the trunk. Her eyebrows raised. Excuse me? Pop the trunk, he repeated, this time stepping closer. On what grounds? She asked, voice still steady. This is a routine request, ma'am. If you don't comply, we may have to escalate. Escalate? For getting gas? She was too tired for this. Too done. Her fingers shook slightly as they hovered near the console. She didn't press the trunk button. Instead, she raised her phone. I'm calling my father. Ma'am, we're giving you a lawful order, the shorter one said, voice harder now. She didn't flinch, didn't shout, didn't plead. She just whispered, I'm calling my father, right now. Her thumb tapped the first number in her favorites, the one listed only as Dad. It rang once. He answered on the second beat. Janelle? Her throat tightened. Daddy, I need you to come to the Shell station off Eastbridge and Jensen. Right now. There was a pause. Then just 3 words. I'm on my way. She ended the call. The deputies exchanged a glance. What was that? One of them asked. Janelle didn't answer. They had no idea what was coming. No idea who they had just messed with. But they were about to find out. And this night, this ordinary night, was about to become unforgettable. The night air had shifted. It wasn't just the temperature or the way the dusty breeze seemed to hold its breath. It was something thicker. A quiet wrongness settling over Pump like a storm cloud that hadn't quite cracked open yet. Janelle Brooks stood beside her Dodge Dart, phone still warm in her hand after the call. Her father was on his way. That should have brought some comfort. But the 2 sheriff's deputies hadn't moved. Deputy Monroe, tall and square-jawed, paced slowly in front of her vehicle, sweeping his flashlight along the ground as if searching for ghosts. The other, Officer Hill, shorter and broad in the shoulders, hung back near the trunk, his eyes shifting between Janelle and the back seat. Neither of them had said a word since she made the call. That somehow made it worse. Ma'am, Monroe finally said, stepping back toward her, we need you to comply. I gave you my ID, Janelle replied, her voice calm, laced with fatigue but not fear. I told you why I'm here. What exactly am I being accused of? Monroe tilted his head. You match the description of a suspicious vehicle. Silver sedan, woman driver, late night hours, could be case in the area. Janelle blinked. Case in the area? This is a gas station. I'm wearing hospital scrubs. There's a Paw Patrol blanket in the back seat. Hill spoke up then. You didn't answer when we first pulled in. I didn't get a chance, she replied, eyes narrowing. You had your flashlight in my face before I could even speak. Monroe didn't like that. His posture stiffened. Attitude's not going to help. Janelle crossed her arms tightly across her chest, feeling the ache in her biceps from lifting patients all day. Neither is being treated like I robbed a bank for filling up my car. He took a step closer. His boots scraped against concrete, a little louder than necessary. The beam of his flashlight traced the outline of her name badge again, still clipped to her scrub top. He read it aloud this time. Janelle Brooks, Cascade Memorial. Janelle nodded once. Correct. Where's your address? On my driver's license. You live in Dry Creek? No. Cottonwood Lane. South Side. Monroe paused, his jaw tightening like he didn't like the answers but couldn't contradict them. What are your sons' names? That made Janelle freeze. What does that have to do with anything? She asked, her voice suddenly sharper. Hill stepped forward now too, closing the triangle. "We're just trying to verify your story, ma'am." "My story?" she repeated. "You think I made up my job? My house? My kids? We're just—" "No," she cut him off. "You're just fishing for a reason to justify stopping a black single mom at a gas station." Monroe's hand drifted near his belt, not on his gun, but close. The universal sign of "I dare you." "You got a problem with law enforcement?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Janelle let out a slow breath. "I have a problem with being treated like I'm guilty for existing. You've asked your questions. I've answered. So unless there's an actual reason, I'm being detained." "You're not being detained," Hill cut in quickly. "Then why are you still here?" she demanded. "Why did two cruisers box me in before I could even enter my pin at the pump?" Neither of them had a good answer. They didn't expect her to push back. Not calmly, not clearly, not without raising her voice. That was the thing about systemic intimidation. It relied on compliance, on fear, on silence, and Janelle wasn't silent anymore. A soft squeak came from the gas station door. A skinny young man in a bright orange hoodie stepped out, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. He couldn't have been older than 19. A name tag hung sideways on his chest. Jasper. "Hey," he called, tentative but clear. "She's been here maybe 2 minutes. Didn't do anything. Cameras caught everything if y'all need it." Monroe turned like a snake. "This doesn't concern you." Jasper held his ground. "Kind of does. I work here. Go back inside." "I'm just saying," Jasper mumbled, backing away. "She didn't do anything." Monroe turned back to Janelle with a flicker of irritation. His authority was being questioned from all sides now. First her, now a teenage clerk. It showed in his eyes. "This is your last warning," he said low. "Open the trunk." Janelle didn't move, not without a warrant. Hill took a small step forward. "Ma'am." "Don't ma'am me," she snapped, the exhaustion boiling up into anger. "You've been circling me like a suspect from the moment you pulled in. You want to search my car? Get a warrant. You want to detain me? Arrest me and explain it to a judge." Monroe's flashlight beam tightened. His lips parted as if to speak, but then headlights. Sharp, controlled, no engine rev. Just a soft rumble of something powerful pulling into the lot. All three of them turned. A blacked-out SUV. Clean, government-grade tint. Parked slow and silent next to Janelle's car. Janelle didn't breathe. The driver's side door opened, and Colonel Braxton Wells stepped out. 6 feet 3 inches, imposing, but calm. He didn't storm. He didn't shout. He simply closed the door behind him, rolled his sleeves slightly, and adjusted his stance. The air changed again, like a tide pulling back from shore before the crash. Janelle swallowed hard, not from fear, but from relief. Braxton walked toward her, never breaking stride, eyes scanning her face, her posture, her hands. The soldier in him saw everything in seconds. Then, only then, he turned to the officers. "Problem here, gentlemen?" he asked. Monroe faltered. Not visibly, but enough. Hill blinked, then shifted his stance. Janelle exhaled slowly. Her father was here. And suddenly, the ones holding flashlights weren't in control anymore. Colonel Braxton Wells didn't need a uniform to command a scene. He stood in the space between his daughter and the officers, not with a hand on his hip or a badge of any kind, but with stillness. Controlled, intentional stillness. The kind honed not in classrooms or county trainings, but in war zones where timing was survival. Deputy Monroe squared his shoulders like a man trying to reclaim power that had already left the room. "Sir," he began, "this is a police matter. We received a call about a suspicious vehicle matching this one's description." Braxton didn't blink. "Suspicious how?" Monroe hesitated. "Silver sedan. Woman driver. Circling the area late at night." "And did the call include a license plate?" Braxton asked, voice level, tone firm but measured. "No, sir." "Vehicle make? Model?" "Just a silver sedan." "So," Braxton said slowly, stepping once to the side, "you boxing a woman at a gas station demanded identification, attempted a search without probable cause, all because she's in a silver car at night? Hill chimed in now, trying to salvage control. Sir, we were following protocol. The report matched a general description. She refused to comply with a lawful order to open the trunk. Refused. Braxton turned his head slightly. She asserted her constitutional rights. He shifted his gaze back to Monroe, which, unless something's changed since I served, is still legal. You're military? Hill asked cautiously, eyes darting to the SUV. Retired, Braxton replied. 32 years. Delta Force commander. And right now, you're standing in front of my daughter, who's a nurse, by the way, not a suspect, not a threat. A black single mom just trying to get home after saving lives for 14 hours straight. The weight of those words settled heavy. Even Hill flinched at the phrase, black single mom. Because beneath everything, beneath the badge, beneath the procedure, beneath the thin veil of protocol, was a truth too many tried to ignore. Blackness was still seen as suspicious, still questioned, still forced to prove innocence before being granted humanity. Braxton didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence filled the silence more than shouting ever could. Monroe took a step forward anyway. Sir, if you continue to interfere with an active investigation. Braxton raised one finger. Not aggressively. Not rudely. Just one finger, mid-air. It was enough to stop Monroe mid-sentence. This isn't an investigation, Braxton said quietly. It's a fishing expedition built on bias. And you're not dealing with someone who's going to let it slide. From the corner of her eye, Janelle saw the clerk, Jasper, re-emerge at the edge of the station's glass doors, this time holding up his phone like a flag. Sir, he said, voice louder this time, I've got footage from when she pulled in. She didn't do anything wrong. Monroe spun. Go back inside. No, I'm staying right here, Jasper replied, firmer now. Y'all came in hot, like she was robbing the place. I got audio, video, and security cams are all over the lot. Hill's jaw twitched. Braxton didn't look away from the deputies. It appears the truth is inconvenient tonight. Janelle hadn't spoken since her father arrived. She stood behind him like a pillar herself, tired yes but grounded. Her chest still rose and fell quickly, the adrenaline not yet fading. But her fingers had stopped shaking. She watched the way her father didn't just talk. He controlled. Every word, every pause, every stare meant something. He wasn't just a man. He was a moment, one the cops hadn't prepared for. You still haven't told me why you're demanding to search your car, Braxton continued. No stolen vehicle alert. No warrant. No visible cause. No reason. Monroe swallowed. She got an attitude, Hill muttered under his breath. Braxton turned. Slowly. What did you say? Hill immediately took a half step back. I meant. She was uncooperative. She was exhausted. Janelle said, stepping forward finally, her voice controlled but edged with steel. I told you I was a nurse. I showed you my ID. I explained where I lived. I told you I had kids waiting. And you still treated me like a liar. Braxton's eyes stayed on Hill. You mistook exhaustion for resistance. You mistook calm for defiance. And you mistook silence for weakness. Hill didn't respond. Monroe tried again. Sir, if your daughter had complied. Stop, Braxton said. The word hit like a gavel. Sharp. Final. If you say complied one more time, he warned, voice low, you're going to find yourself explaining your choices to someone with more stars than you can count. Janelle took a long breath. For the first time in 20 minutes, it reached all the way to her lungs. Behind them, Jasper was now standing close to the door, clearly filming, phone angled steady. From across the lot, the couple in the white pickup, who'd been parked with engines idling, rolled down their window halfway. People were watching now, not just with phones, with eyes, with judgment, with memory. Monroe finally backed a step away. We're done here. Braxton didn't move. Not yet, you're not. He walked forward slowly until he stood directly between the two officers, facing them both at once. You don't get to walk away and act like nothing happened. You box her in. You threaten escalation. You use your badge as a weapon instead of a shield. That's not policing. That's cowardice hiding behind protocol. Neither man spoke. Braxton lowered his voice one final time. Now, you're going to leave. And if you so much as tail her car, make a note in a file, or try to justify this later, I promise you, your careers won't survive the week. Hill shifted his weight awkwardly. Monroe's jaw worked like he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. The moment had passed, and they had lost. Braxton turned back to Janelle. Pump your gas. She nodded, moved to the keypad, entered her PIN. Hand steady this time. No one stopped her. The fuel flowed. The night held its breath. And across the lot, two men who thought they were in control now realized they'd walked into the wrong kind of war. A quiet one, with no weapons. Just a nurse, a black single mom, a military dad who didn't need a shout, and a truth that refused to be silenced. The nozzle clicked into place. Gas flowed, finally, steady, rhythmic, almost too loud against the silence that had overtaken Pump 4. Janelle stood next to her car with one hand resting on the pump handle, her eyes watching the digital numbers climb. But her mind was still back at the moment her finger press called Dad. Everything changed after that. Colonel Braxton Wells stood just behind her, arms crossed, eyes tracking every movement made by the two Coconino County officers now loitering awkwardly by their cruisers. Not retreating, not advancing, just suspended in that space where authority once wielded now felt brittle, hollow. The gas station was no longer theirs, and they knew it. Monroe kept glancing toward Braxton's SUV, like trying to make sense of how someone who looked like that, mid-50s, built like granite, quiet as a whisper, could unsettle him more than any firearm ever had. Hill avoided eye contact altogether, pretending to check his radio. They were trying to save face, but it was too late. The moment the call connected and Janelle's voice, calm but taut, had said, "Daddy, I need you to come to the Shell station right now." Something shifted in the air. It wasn't just the presence of her father. It was what it represented. She wasn't alone anymore. Not in the gas station. Not in the fight. Not in the injustice. Janelle finished pumping and hung the nozzle back on the cradle. The pump beeped, receipt half jammed in its slot, waving in the breeze. She didn't take it. She just turned to her father and said, "We good." Braxton's gaze never left the officers. "We're good." She walked back to the driver's side door, opened it, slid into the seat. The engine was still running. She closed the door, but didn't drive off. Not yet. She wasn't leaving her father behind. From the corner of her eye, she saw the store clerk, Jasper, step out again, phone in hand. His orange hoodie practically glowed under the buzzing fluorescent lights. "I got the whole thing," he said, voice louder now. From the moment she pulled in, body language questions everything. Hill turned. "You're interfering with law enforcement." "Nope," Jasper replied, cool and direct. "I'm keeping people honest." Braxton didn't say a word. He just watched. Watched how the truth walked out of the store with a kid barely out of high school. Watched how the weight of a badge cracked when the cameras turned on. Watched how power, real power, didn't need sirens. Just clarity. The door to the convenience store opened again. This time, it was an older man, white mid-60s gruff, who stepped out. He wore a trucker cap low over his brow and carried a clipboard under one arm. His eyes moved slow but sharp. "Name's Burton," he said, walking toward Braxton. "I manage this place nights." Braxton nodded slightly. "I reviewed the security cam already," Burton added. 3 angles. All clean. Girl pulls in, parks at pump 4, stands there not bothering a soul. Then they roll in like she robbed a joint. Hill stiffened. "Sir, I suggest you go back inside." Burton looked at him flatly. "And I suggest you not insult my cameras or my memory." Janelle's fingers tightened on the steering wheel inside the car. Her eyes began to sting, but she wouldn't let it fall. No tears. Not tonight. "Mr. Wells," Burton continued, turning to Braxton, "you want a copy? I'll email it to you or the mayor. Doesn't matter to me." Braxton nodded. "Send it to both." Hill stepped back toward his cruiser. He muttered something into his shoulder mic, more out of habit than strategy. Across the lot, a couple in a white pickup truck rolled down their window halfway. "Everything okay?" the driver asked hesitantly. Braxton didn't answer, but the question itself was enough to mark a moment. People were paying attention now, not just with cameras, but with concern. It wasn't about going viral anymore. It was about not letting this pass like every other incident swept under the asphalt. Janelle rolled down her window a few inches. "How long before they leave?" Braxton shrugged. "Doesn't matter. We're not going anywhere until they do." "They're not going to come back later?" "They won't," he said simply. "Not after tonight." Inside the gas station, Burton disappeared behind the counter, already typing on his desktop monitor. Jasper stayed at the window like a sentry. Braxton walked slowly back toward Janelle's car, pausing at her window. "You all right?" he asked. She gave a nod, then shook her head. "Not really." Braxton leaned his forearm on the roof. "You handled yourself." "They didn't even care I had ID," she said. "Didn't look at my badge. Didn't ask where I was coming from. Just decided I looked wrong." "You didn't fold," Braxton said. "I shouldn't have to hold my breath every time I'm outside past dark." "No," he agreed. "You shouldn't." There was a silence, not uncomfortable, just real. Then her voice softened. "I wasn't scared." Braxton raised an eyebrow. "No." She shook her head. "I was furious." He smiled just slightly. "That's the right thing to be." She glanced at the rear view. Monroe was now pacing near his cruiser. Hill leaned into the window, speaking into the radio. "They're going to write it up like I was uncooperative," she said. "They can write all they want," Braxton replied. "Doesn't change what's on the footage. Doesn't change who watched it unfold." She looked at him carefully. "Were you always that calm?" "No," he said, "but I learned." "How?" Braxton looked toward the mountains in the distance, their jagged outlines black against a cloudless night sky. "Because in my world, the loudest man in the room was usually the most afraid." Janelle leaned back against her seat. Let the engine hum. Let the moment linger. She didn't drive away. She let herself exist there, present, whole, unbroken. Outside, Hill and Monroe finally returned to their cruisers. Doors slammed. Engines turned. They backed out without sirens, without a word. Braxton watched them until they were gone. Only then did he turn to his daughter and say, "Now we're good." And Janelle finally eased her foot onto the brake, shifted into drive, and rolled out a lot. Her father's SUV gliding silently behind her like a shadow that knew when to speak, and when just being there was enough. The SUV sat quietly across the street from Janelle's house, headlights off, engine humming low. Inside, Colonel Braxton Wells leaned back in the driver's seat, one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely on his thigh. He wasn't watching for trouble. He was watching to make sure it knew it had been seen. Janelle's Dodge Dart had pulled into the driveway 15 minutes earlier. Porch light on, front door open and closed. Safe, but Braxton didn't leave right away. He never did, not after nights like this. His mind worked in tactical grids, not minutes. You don't end a standoff when the uniforms drive off. You end it when the energy's gone, when the ground is yours again, when the weight lifts. And tonight, that weight still lingered. He glanced up at the sky, clear and vast above northern Arizona. It reminded him of Afghanistan. Quiet didn't always mean safe. Stillness didn't always mean peace. Inside the house, through the front window, he could see the living room light flicker on. A shadow passed by, a small one of the twins, likely Malik, judging by the height. A minute later, the kitchen light glowed, and steam fogged a portion of the glass. She was making tea. He smiled barely. That was his daughter. Even when rattled, she didn't collapse. She brewed comfort. He turned the ignition off, stepped out of the SUV, and crossed the street with the quiet gait of a man who never needed to announce his presence. The desert gravel didn't crunch under his boots. His breath didn't fog the air. He was part of the dark. He always had been. Janelle opened the door before he knocked. "You still don't knock, huh?" she said. Braxton gave a small shrug. Only knock when I'm not sure who's inside. She stepped aside. Come in. The inside of her house was modest, clean, lived in. There was a basket of unfolded laundry on the couch, a Lego castle half built on the coffee table, and the smell of cinnamon tea drifting in from the kitchen. I made 2 cups, she said, walking ahead of him. Didn't ask if you wanted one. You know me. She handed him the mug without ceremony. He took it, sipped, nodded in approval. They sat at the kitchen table, both facing the window like it was a sentry post. From there, they could see the driveway, the porch, the quiet street beyond. Janelle didn't speak right away. Neither did Braxton. It was a kind of silence they both understood, earned, not awkward, the kind that came from people who'd both seen too much and still chose to stay standing. You parked across the street for 20 minutes, she said finally. Standard practice. She snorted softly. You think they're coming back? No, he said, but I don't believe in assumptions, especially not when someone's pride's been checked. Janelle stared down into her cup. They're going to say I was hostile or uncooperative. They always do. I kept thinking, she continued, what if I'd raised my voice? What if I'd said no too loud? Would they have pulled me out of the car? Would I have been cuffed in front of the gas station cameras? Braxton didn't answer immediately. He let the question settle in the space between them. They wouldn't have gotten away with it, he said finally. Not this time. But they've gotten away with it before. He looked at her, really looked. I know, he said. A silence passed. Your voice on that call, Janelle said, changing the subject slightly. You didn't even ask what happened. Just said, I'm on my way. Braxton leaned back in the chair, fingers wrapped around the mug. Because it didn't matter what happened. You called. That was enough. She smiled barely. Always been like that. No, he said, but I learned. Janelle cocked her head. From the military? Braxton nodded slowly. And from watching your mother. That woman could scare a colonel with a glance and make tea for a wounded neighbor in the same breath. I wish the boys remembered her. They remember what you carry. The tea cooled between them. Outside, a dog barked down the street. Somewhere far off, a freight train howled into the dark. Did you ever lose it? Janelle asked suddenly. Like, really lose control? Braxton chuckled once, low. You ever hear the story about the lieutenant who tried to lecture me about tactical discipline during a training exercise? No, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just pulled out the footage from the helmet cam and let him watch himself screw up in 4K. Then I made him write a 3-page report on humility. Janelle laughed for real this time. The sound surprised even her. You don't fight fire with fire, Braxton said. You fight fire with water. Or sometimes with nothing at all, just a steel wall that doesn't move. She grew quiet again, then said, I was scared. Not for me, for what they might do before you got there. Braxton reached across the table, not dramatically, just enough to place one hand over hers. They didn't, he said, and they won't. And if they had, I'd still be there. His tone didn't shift. It didn't need to. The certainty was enough. Janelle looked down at their hands. Military dad saves daughter, she said quietly. Braxton frowned. What? That's what people online are probably saying already. You know it's going to get out, right? He didn't reply. Just sipped his tea. They're going to make you the hero. And you the victim? He asked, finally looking at her. She hesitated. Yeah. Braxton shook his head slowly. You weren't the victim, Janelle. You were the front line. I just showed up as backup. The words sat heavy between them. The truth of it wasn't in the volume. It was in the weight. Janelle leaned back in her chair, drained the last of her tea, and said, I don't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to go home. I know, Braxton said, but sometimes the world writes your name on a story you didn't ask to be in. And what do you do then? He looked at her, proud and unflinching. You stand in it. Deputy Monroe didn't like silence, especially not this kind. The kind that followed him as he leaned back against his cruiser, arms crossed, feeling the eyes on him. The kind that made the hairs on his neck itch, like truth was crawling up his spine and tapping his shoulder. Officer Hill stood a few feet away, eyes bouncing between Braxton Wells and the gas station store, where that kid, Jasper, still held his phone like a sword. And Braxton? He stood at the edge of pump for like he'd been planted there by the earth itself, immovable. Still, his arms weren't crossed. His voice wasn't raised. He just watched them unravel. "You done?" Braxton asked, breaking the silence. His tone wasn't aggressive. It was curious, cold steel and velvet. "Or are you trying to come up with a reason to keep standing here?" Monroe stepped forward. "Try to reassert control with motion alone. We're assessing the situation." "You assessed?" Braxton said. "She pumped her gas. She gave her ID. She didn't break the law. So what else is there?" Hill cleared his throat. "We were following up on a call. Standard protocol." "That phrase," Braxton said, nodding slowly. "You like that one?" Hill blinked. "Sir, standard protocol. It's what people hide behind when they're doing something wrong and hoping the rules will cover them. But here's the thing." He took one step forward, closing the gap. "Protocol doesn't override judgment. And what you exercised tonight wasn't caution. It was control." Janelle stood behind him, leaning against her car, arms folded tight across her chest. Her fingers twitched against her scrubs, but her face? Set, unmoving. Monroe's jaw clenched. "Look, we were just trying to—" "No," Braxton interrupted. "You were trying to find something. Anything. A reason to turn a nurse into a suspect. A mother into a threat. A routine gas stop into a warning. I think you're reading too much into—" "I'm reading exactly what you wrote," Braxton said, eyes narrowing slightly. "With your body language. With your questions. With the fact that you boxed her in with 2 vehicles before she even had a chance to swipe her card." Jasper, still recording from the store doorway, gave a small nod. "He's right, y'all. It was fast. Like aggressive fast." "Put the phone down," Monroe snapped. Jasper didn't move. Not a chance. Braxton held up a hand, gently, like he was signaling to a younger soldier on patrol. "Let him film. He's doing what you're supposed to do, documenting." Monroe's chest rose with quick breath. "Sir, if you continue to interfere with our duties—" "You'll what?" Braxton asked softly. That stopped him, because the question wasn't loud. It was lethal. "You'll arrest me?" Braxton went on. "You'll escalate again? You'll make the same mistake twice." Hill shifted his weight, sensing the walls closing in. "We didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," Braxton said, turning toward him now. "You didn't care. You didn't ask. You saw a black woman at night and decided she had to be more than she claimed. Suspicious by default." Monroe tried to stand tall. "We don't work off race." "You work off patterns," Braxton replied, "but only the ones that justify fear." The wind picked up then, just enough to rustle the faded flag over the convenience store. The kind of silence returned that used to follow Braxton into foreign terrain. The breathless pause before a decision is made that can't be undone. Janelle finally spoke. "Do you know what that felt like?" she asked, voice low. "Being told to pop the trunk. Like I was smuggling bodies?" Standing there in scrubs, barely holding myself upright after 14 hours of coding patients and watching kids fight for their lives? I was more exhausted than scared. But that didn't matter to you. You didn't see that. Neither officer responded. She stepped forward, voice hardening. "You saw my skin. You saw my tired eyes. You saw a woman alone at night, and you assumed the worst." Braxton tilted his head. "You see now," he said to the deputies. "She doesn't need me to speak for her. She's done it herself. Calm, clear, stronger than either of you were when you stepped out of those cars." Monroe tried to change the subject. "Sir, I understand you're a veteran. We respect that." Braxton's eyes didn't flinch. "I didn't come here to be respected. I came here because my daughter was surrounded by men with weapons and badges who thought the law only protected people who looked like them." He'll open his mouth, then closed it. Because what do you say to that? The truth had been spoken, and they had no rebuttal. Braxton exhaled. Slow, measured, then turned toward Jasper. "Son, you still filming?" "Every second." "Good," Braxton said. "Send it to the mayor and the sheriff's office. If they want commentary, they know how to find me." Monroe raised a hand. "That won't be necessary." "I think it will," Braxton said. "Because even if you leave now, this isn't over. Internal reviews, body cam pulls, community meetings, all coming your way." Janelle stood beside him now, her exhaustion woven with something new, resolve. "He'll look down." Monroe took one last glance at them both, then turned back toward his cruiser. "We'll file a report," he muttered. Braxton didn't respond. Didn't need to. They got into their vehicles. Engines turned. No lights. No sirens. They just left. The moment they were gone, Braxton turned to his daughter. "Still want to drive home?" She exhaled. "Not alone." He nodded. "I'll follow." As she got in the car, Jasper called out from the store. "Hey, Miss Brooks?" She looked over. "I'm sorry." She smiled. "Tired. Grateful. Thank you for staying." Then she closed the door, shifted into drive, and pulled out a lot with her father right behind her. Because sometimes the strongest weapons don't make noise. Sometimes they just stand, still, and change the battlefield without ever firing a shot. The local news wouldn't get the headline right. They never did. When the story finally aired on Channel 12 2 days later, the on-screen cheering read, "Military dad saves daughter from unwarranted police stop." Neat. Sanitized. Just enough bite to go viral. But not enough to make the station lose sponsors. But that headline, "Military dad saves daughter," didn't come from the newsroom. It came from the parking lot. From the shaky vertical video that Jasper uploaded to Twitter just past midnight. From the 3-minute footage that began with flashlights in Janelle's face, followed by officers circling like sharks, then cut sharply to the arrival of black SUV. And the moment a man stepped out and changed everything without raising a single decibel. Colonel Braxton Wells had never asked for attention. He avoided cameras, speeches, medals, anything that painted over the quiet cost of 32 years in the military, 12 of them in Delta Force. He liked things tidy, controlled, invisible. But what he did in the parking lot that night wasn't about visibility. It was about presence. Real presence. The kind that silences a storm. And by the time he stood between his daughter and 2 armed officers under buzzing fluorescent lights, it wasn't just Janelle who felt the shift. Everyone did. It started with the silence. After Monroe and Hill pulled away, the lot was still, like someone had vacuumed the tension out of the air. Janelle sat behind the wheel of her car, hands still on the steering wheel, unmoving. Her foot hovered above the gas pedal. But she didn't press it. She was waiting for her breath to slow, for her pulse to fall beneath crisis level, for the truth of what just happened to catch up with her body. Braxton stood a few paces away, eyes scanning the surrounding streets, not looking at her yet. That was his way. Tactical, patient, let the dust settle, let the adrenaline drain. Only then did he move to her window and knock. Once. She rolled it down just enough. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," she said, but her voice betrayed her. It cracked around the edges. Braxton didn't press. He just nodded and said, "Let's go." They pulled out a lot together, her Dodge leading, his SUV behind. The 2 vehicles moved slowly, deliberately, like a convoy of dignity, refusing to retreat in a hurry. 10 minutes later, they arrived in her neighborhood, South Cottonwood Lane. Modest, middle class, quiet at night except for the occasional porch light flicker or barking dog. Braxton parked across the street again. Janelle parked in the driveway and killed the engine. The porch light was still on. Inside, the babysitter would be asleep on the couch, cartoons still muted on the screen. The twins were down for the night. She should have gone inside, checked their blankets, made tea, but instead, she just sat. She didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't fall apart. She just stayed still like her father had. Her phone buzzed. Jasper, gas station clerk. "Hey, I posted the video. It's getting views. You cool with that?" She stared at the screen, then typed, "Let it ride." She wasn't trying to be famous. She just wasn't going to be invisible. Across the street, Braxton's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Answered anyway. Wells. Colonel, the voice said. Young. Professional. Nervous. This is Sergeant Kendall from the sheriff's office. Internal Affairs. He didn't reply. We've received footage from an incident involving 2 of our deputies. You were named. Still no reply. We'd like to talk, sir. You and your daughter. Braxton finally spoke. I'll think about it. Sir, you want a statement? He asked. Start with the video. Then we'll talk. Click. He ended the call. Across the windshield, he could still see her car parked in the driveway. Lights off now. Porch light still on. She was inside. Safe. Not just because he showed up, but because she stood her ground until he arrived. The news would get it wrong. They'd call him the hero. They'd say, military dad saves daughter. But that wasn't what happened. What happened was more layered than a viral clip, more complicated than a headline, more real than any press release the sheriff's department might draft. He didn't save her. He backed her up. The next morning, the footage had 48,000 views. By noon, it had crossed 100K. Someone added captions to the clip. Zooming in on the moment, Monroe asked to search the trunk, and Janelle said, without blinking, I'm calling my father. The audio cut to Braxton's voice 5 minutes later. You didn't detain her. You cornered her. A reply from Hill. She had an attitude. Then Braxton again, the volume fading back in. No, she had boundaries. People reposted that line. She had boundaries. It became a quote, a comment, a movement. At the hospital that afternoon, Janelle clocked in like always. The badge scanner beeped. The doors opened. People whispered in the break room. Someone nodded at her in the hallway. She didn't stop to answer questions. Didn't replay the moment. She just went to work because there were patients who needed her. Because what happened in that parking lot wasn't the end of her story. It was just a moment the world noticed she had won. At the sheriff's office, Monroe sat at a desk red-eyed, writing a statement. Hill stared at the floor during his debrief. In the corner of the conference room, a screen replayed the video over and over. No one said much. Because what could they say? They got caught. And the man who showed up? The man in the black SUV with the stillness of war in his bones? He didn't come to make a scene. He came to make a line and dared them to cross it. They didn't. And now the whole country knew why. Jasper Mendoza had been working the graveyard shift at the Shell station for just under 5 months. 19 years old. High school diploma. No college plans. Not yet. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do next. Maybe IT, maybe something in music. For now, he worked from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., restocking jerky, ringing up sodas, and watching the same surveillance monitors every night from behind bulletproof glass. The job was boring. Until it wasn't. That night, when the silver Dodge Dart pulled up to Pump 4, Jasper barely looked up. Just another late-night driver. Probably tired. Probably a nurse. He could tell from the way the woman moved. Exhausted, slow, like her body had forgotten how to rest. She looked like someone who didn't want to talk. He respected that. But then, 2 sheriff cruisers pulled in back-to-back. Fast. Aggressive. Lights off. But energy turned up to 11. Jasper's stomach dropped. He knew that look. Not the woman's. Theirs. The cops got out already suspicious. He leaned forward, watching the monitors. His hand hovered over the store phone. They were talking to her now. Flashlights aimed. One of them, Monroe, he'd seen it before, was standing too close. The other one, Hill, was circling her car like a vulture. Jasper moved to the door, opened it halfway, and stepped outside. She's been here like 2 minutes, he called out, not bothering anybody. He tried to sound neutral, non-threatening, like he wasn't trying to start anything, just state facts. Monroe turned fast. Stay inside. This doesn't concern you. Jasper felt the words burn, but he nodded, backed up. He didn't go far, though. Instead, he pulled out his phone and hit record. He didn't blink. Not when they asked Janelle to pop the trunk. Not when she raised her voice just slightly, controlled but firm. Not when the black SUV turned into the lot and everything stopped moving for a second. Jasper recognized power. Not the uniform kind, not the badge and gun kind. The other kind. The quiet, deadly kind that you don't question because you feel in your spine. The man who stepped out of that SUV didn't yell, didn't strut. He observed. Then he owned the space without permission. Jasper kept recording as the exchange unfolded. The man, Colonel Braxton Wells, though Jasper wouldn't know his name until later, moved with precise calm. He dismantled the officer's logic like someone disarming a bomb. He never swore, never raised his tone. But the way he said, "You didn't detain her. You cornered her," made even Jasper shiver. He'll try to push back. Braxton didn't flinch. And in that moment, Jasper understood this wasn't about a gas station. It wasn't about protocol. It was about presence. This wasn't a father coming to protect his daughter. It was a commander assessing a threat to one of his own. Later, after the deputies left, Jasper walked up to Janelle's car window. He didn't know what to say. His heart was still pounding. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Thanks for not pretending this didn't happen." "I filmed it," he said, "in case you want it." She stared at him. "You filmed it?" "Everything." She nodded again, slower this time. "Hold on to it." He did. He held on to it until after midnight, when he uploaded the 3-minute clip to Twitter with a caption. This happened at the Shell station on Eastbridge. Nurse. Late night shift. 2 cops. Then her dad pulled up and ended it. He didn't expect it to blow up, but it did. By the time Jasper's shift ended at 5:03 a.m., his phone had over 300 notifications. Messages, DMs, reporters. The video had been shared by a nurse in Flagstaff, then a veterans group, then a celebrity chef who quoted the line, "She had boundaries." Jasper didn't go home. He went back inside the station, pulled the security footage, clipped the overhead angle of the gas pumps, and emailed it to a Gmail address Colonel Wells had written down on a receipt the night before. No fanfare, just a subject line. Footage, 11:42 p.m. incident, and a single sentence in the body. "I saved everything. Let me know if you need more." He hit send. Then he exhaled for what felt like the first time all night. The next afternoon, a car pulled up to the station, black, with government plates. Jasper stepped out from behind the register and met a man in a navy suit halfway across the parking lot. "You Jasper?" the man asked. "Yeah. Mayor Clean sent me. He wants to meet." "Why?" He saw the video. Said you didn't blink. Jasper swallowed. "I didn't know I was supposed to." "You weren't," the man said. Then he handed over a card. "If anything happens, you call me." Jasper looked down. Assistant City Attorney, Civil Rights Division. He pocketed it. That night, Janelle sent him a message. She didn't say much. Just a photo of her 2 sons on the living room floor, building a Lego castle, and a single text. "Thanks for helping make sure I got home to them." Jasper stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't respond right away, because it hit harder than he expected. He wasn't a hero. He was just a kid with a phone who didn't look away. But in a world where people blinked all the time, where looking away was safer, easier, he hadn't. And maybe that was enough. A few days later, the sheriff's office released a statement. Both officers were under administrative review. Local news crews started camping outside Cascade Memorial Hospital. Hashtags kept trending, and the phrase Jasper had tagged at the end of his original post, just 3 words, began popping up across comment threads, stitched onto shirts, pinned to bulletin boards and teacher lounges and community centers. She had boundaries. Dry Creek, Arizona had always prided itself on being the kind of town where nothing ever happens. That changed in under 72 hours. It started with a video, shaky, grainy, recorded on an iPhone from behind a gas station window. Then it was reposted with captions. Then it was stitched into a 60-second TikTok edit that cut from Janelle Brooks standing beside her car to the exact moment Colonel Braxton Wells stepped out his SUV and said, "You didn't detain her. You cornered her." By morning, it had over 200,000 views. By noon, a trending hashtag began circulating. Hashtag cops harass, hashtag black single mom, hashtag military dad saves daughter. And suddenly, Dry Creek wasn't quiet anymore. At the town diner, Wilma's, the kind of place where every regular had a coffee mug with her name on it, the booths were buzzing. She works at Cascade Memorial, right? Her dad's military. Delta Force, someone said. They boxed her in for getting gas. Miss Carla, who had worked the register since '97, just shook her head. They picked the wrong daughter that night. No one disagreed. Across town at the Coconino County Sheriff's Office, things weren't buzzing. They were boiling. The sheriff's phone had rung 5 times before he even poured his coffee that morning. 4 calls were from local residents. The 5th was from the mayor's office. By the time he reached his desk, the email inbox had nearly 24 messages. Subject lines like, unacceptable behavior caught on camera. Why was a nurse treated like a criminal? You owe that family a public apology. Inside a conference room with the blinds drawn, Deputies Monroe and Hill sat across from an internal affairs officer and a monitor playing back footage from the incident. Monroe's face stayed tight and unreadable. Hill looked like he hadn't slept since the night it happened. When the clip hit the part where Colonel Wells calmly identified himself, 32 years, Delta Force commander. Hill looked down and stayed that way. The officer didn't yell. He didn't need to. The facts were right there. So were the optics. And in a town like Dry Creek, optics were everything. At Cascade Memorial, Janelle clocked in like she always did. Badge swipe, elevator ride, 3rd floor. The ER was short-staffed as usual. 2 codes had come in before noon. But something was different. People looked at her longer. Not in judgment, in recognition. She wasn't just Nurse Brooks anymore. She was the woman from the video. A colleague, Marcy, a nurse from NICU, caught her between rooms and whispered, "Saw the clip. You didn't flinch. I'd have lost it." Janelle offered a tired smile. You don't get to lose it when they already think you're dangerous. Marcy blinked, then nodded. Still, you were solid. Janelle didn't respond. She just kept walking, because there were charts to update, IVs to reset, lives to stabilize. She wasn't interested in fame. She just wanted fairness. Back at home that evening, her sons were building Lego towers on the living room floor. The TV was off. The babysitter had left banana bread on the counter with a note. Heard what happened. Proud of you. Hope the boys don't see the bad parts. Janelle read it twice, then put on the fridge. Next to it, she taped a drawing Marcus had made. 3 stick figures, all holding hands. One was her. One was his brother. The tallest one had gray hair and boots. He'd labeled it Papa Brax. Across town, in a modest office above City Hall, Mayor Clive Clean met with 2 members of the town council and the city attorney. He watched the video twice, then asked to see the full report. When he finished, he said, "This doesn't get buried. It gets addressed." He wasn't a revolutionary, just a man who'd seen what happened when things festered too long in silence. He called the sheriff himself. Scheduled a town hall for Friday night. No press, just chairs, a mic, and the people who mattered. Meanwhile, Jasper Mendoza, the gas station clerk, was invited onto a local podcast. He didn't say much, just explained what he saw. "I don't think I did anything special," he said into the mic. "She was just standing there, getting gas. And they came at her like she was hiding something." The host leaned forward. "Why'd you record it?" Jasper hesitated. "Because I've seen people pretend they didn't see. And I didn't want to be one of them." That night, Braxton returned to Janelle's house. He didn't knock. She opened the door before he reached it. "You're not here to sleep, are you?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just checking perimeter." She raised an eyebrow. "Old habits. Necessary ones." They sat on the porch. The sky was streaked with desert twilight. The boys laughed inside, carefree as they should be. Janelle sipped her tea. "They're going to turn me into a headline," she said. "They already have. I didn't ask for that." "I know." She looked at him. "Do you think it'll change anything?" Braxton exhaled slowly. "Maybe not everything, but something. She didn't speak for a while, then said, "You know what scares me most?" He looked at her. "That one day, it'll be one of them standing at pump 4. Braxton nodded. "Then they'll remember what you did, how you stood." She leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes for a moment, just long enough to breathe, because this wasn't about virality. It wasn't about revenge. It was about memory. The memory of a small town that thought it could stay silent, and a night that proved it couldn't anymore. By the time Friday rolled around, the world knew Janelle Brooks's name. Not because she asked them to, not because she went live on Instagram or called a press conference, but because someone else decided to watch, and because she refused to disappear when they tried to erase her. The video had been picked up by regional news, then national. CNN ran a 90-second segment during the late afternoon slot. Nurse confronted by police at gas station. Father, a Delta Force veteran, intervenes. Same headline everywhere. Military dad saves daughter. But none of them really understood. They didn't see the 14 hours she'd worked before she ever pulled into that shell station. They didn't feel the weight of her bones after back-to-back shifts in the trauma unit. The sweat, the heartbreak, the restraint it took not to scream when someone pointed a flashlight at her chest and called her presence suspicious. They didn't understand that justice, for her, wasn't going viral. It was being left the hell alone. She clocked in at Cascade Memorial on Friday at 7 a.m. sharp. No makeup, no smile, no press badge, just the same blue scrubs. The same ID tag clipped to her collar. The same quiet stride that got her through the worst nights of her life. A few of her co-workers approached her in the break room. They offered sympathetic nods, some awkward words. One brought her a coffee. She thanked them, then got back to work. A 6-year-old boy with a ruptured appendix came in around 10 a.m. screaming, clutching his side, scared out of his mind. She calmed him down with a whisper and a squeeze of the hand, talked him through the pain, held him still as they administered sedation, walked his mother to the waiting room, and spoke the words all parents pray to hear. He's going to be okay. Not once did she mention the video. Not once did she bring up her name trending on Twitter. Not once did she lean on what the world now thought she was, because she knew the truth. She wasn't a symbol. She was a nurse, a mother, a woman trying to do her job in a world that didn't always respect her right to exist in peace. When she finally got a moment to breathe, Janelle stepped into the staff bathroom and locked the door behind her. She stared at her reflection under the harsh hospital lighting, noticed the faint circles under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her shoulders still curved forward like she was bracing for another blow. She leaned against the sink and closed her eyes. What she wanted wasn't complicated. She didn't want praise, or interviews, or some hollow apology from a sheriff trying to save face. She just wanted fairness. To fill her gas tank without being boxed in by cruisers. To come home without being interrogated at the pump. To move through the world without constantly proving she belonged in it. That night, after work, she picked up Malik and Marcus from Mrs. Lindell's and drove home in silence. The boys were unusually quiet in the back seat. She caught them watching her in the rear-view mirror more than once. They'd seen part of the video. Even if she didn't show them, kids always knew. At dinner, Marcus asked, "Mom, are people mad at you?" She looked up from the table. "No, baby. People are mad about what happened to me. There's a difference." Malik pushed a green bean around on his plate. "Are the cops coming back?" "No," she said. "They won't come back." Because Papa Brack scared them? She smiled tired. Because the truth scared them. Later that night, she stood in front of the refrigerator. 2 pieces of paper were taped there now. One was a thank you note from a nurse in New Mexico who had found her email and sent a message titled simply, "You're not alone." The other was a drawing Marcus had made, 3 stick figures holding hands. She took a deep breath, reached for a pen and a scrap of paper from the counter, and scribbled a note of her own. "I don't want to be famous. I just want to be treated fairly. No parades, no cameras, just respect, without explanation." She stuck it between the 2 pieces, already on the fridge. Then she turned off the kitchen light, and stood alone in the dark for a moment, breathing, grounding, remembering that justice isn't always a courtroom victory. Sometimes it's a night without fear. Across town, preparations were underway for the town hall Mayor Clean had promised. Folding chairs, a small podium, microphones being tested. Janelle wasn't planning to attend. She didn't need a room full of people clapping for her. She needed them to see her when she was just a woman in line at the store, just a nurse walking to her car, just a mom carrying groceries to the door. Not when she was trending. Always. Colonel Braxton Wells showed up at her door the next morning. She opened it in slippers and a hoodie. "You working today?" he asked. "Night shift." "You resting now?" "Trying." He handed her a paper bag. Inside, banana nut muffins from a bakery on Jefferson Street. "You drove 30 minutes for muffins?" "They're good muffins." She stared at him. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I'm not broken." He nodded. "That's enough for now." They sat on the porch again. Same place as before. Different silence. Janelle sipped coffee from a mug that said, "Best Mom Ever" in glittery font. Clearly a Mother's Day gift from the boys. She looked out at the street. It was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This time, the quiet was earned. This time, she knew the neighborhood saw her differently. Not just as that black nurse from Cascade, but as someone who had stood up, stayed calm, and demanded more without raising her voice. That's all she ever wanted. Not power, not revenge, just fairness. The kind you don't have to earn twice. The porch was quiet again. Not the suffocating quiet of tension, but the kind that settles after a storm. Colonel Braxton Wells sat in a wooden chair he'd helped repair years ago, back when Janelle first moved into the house on South Cottonwood Lane. His posture was as straight as ever, one leg crossed neatly over the other. In his hands, he held a ceramic mug with chipped edges and the words, "World's Okayest Dad," faintly scratched into the side. It was Malik's idea of a joke. Janelle sat across from him in sweatpants and a worn Cascade Memorial hoodie, her bare feet curled beneath her on the porch swing. She looked tired, but not fragile. Never fragile. The sky above them bled into orange and pink, streaking across the Arizona desert in wide, defiant swaths. A breeze stirred the wind chimes hanging from the gutter. The sound was light, glassy. Janelle broke the silence first. "You didn't yell." Braxton looked over, raising one eyebrow. "No, you didn't even raise your voice." "No." She paused. "Why not?" He sipped his coffee. "Because yelling's not strength." "Not really." She tilted her head. "It felt like you were the calmest person in the parking lot." "I was," he said, "but that calm came at a price." Janelle blinked. "What price?" He stared into the street for a moment before answering. "When I was your age, I thought power meant volume. I thought if you wanted to be heard, you had to be louder than the next guy. But years in the field taught me something else." "What's that?" "That the loudest man in the room usually has the least real power." She nodded slowly, the words settling in like sediment in still water. "Calm," he continued, "isn't weakness. It's focus. It's control. And sometimes it's the sharpest weapon you have." "I think that's what threw them off," Janelle said. "That I didn't shout. That I didn't panic." Braxton smiled. "Exactly. They wanted me loud, angry, shaking, so they could say I escalated. But instead," he said, "you stood there, centered, tired but steady, and that scared them more than any protest ever could." She looked down at her hands, callous from years of nursing, still marked with faint bruises from four placements and long shifts. "I wasn't trying to scare anyone." "No," Braxton said, "but sometimes being unshakable makes people confront their own instability." They sat in silence for a while after that. A neighbor passed by walking her dog. She gave him a polite nod, then hesitated, turning back. "I saw the video," she said. Janelle looked up. "I just wanted to say thank you for not letting it slide." Janelle nodded. "Thanks." The woman kept walking, but her words echoed long after she turned the corner. Back inside, The boys were on the floor with Legos. Again, Braxton leaned his head against the porch post. "You know what I realized that night?" "What?" "That you don't need me to save you anymore." Janelle laughed softly. "That obvious, huh?" He smiled, eyes twinkling. "You were always stronger than you knew." "But I didn't need you," she said. "I showed up," he said simply. "That's what I'm here for." "I think a lot of women don't get that," she said. "They don't get someone who just shows up when it counts." Braxton didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. "I wasn't scared for me," she said a moment later. "I was scared that my boys would grow up learning that staying quiet doesn't keep you safe." Braxton leaned forward slightly. "And now," she took a breath, "now I hope they learn something better. That strength doesn't have to look like shouting. That boundaries are not aggression. That sometimes the best protest is not letting someone else rewrite your truth." He smiled. "They're already learning that, just by watching you." Janelle looked toward the front door, where laughter from the living room spilled out through the screen. "They don't even know," she said quietly, "what almost happened, how fast things can spiral when someone decides you look like a problem." "They don't need to know," Braxton replied. "Not yet, but they will," she said. "One day." He nodded. "And when that day comes, they'll know they come from a woman who stood her ground." She reached for the thermos on the porch railing and poured herself another cup of tea. Her hands moved with precision, deliberate, like everything else about her. "So what do I do now?" she asked. Braxton didn't hesitate. "You keep going." "That simple?" "That hard," he corrected. She let the steam rise from her mug into her face, letting it fog the space between thought and breath. "I never wanted this attention," she said. "I know. I never wanted to be a headline." "Then don't be," Braxton said. "Be what you've always been, a nurse, a mother, a woman who did what was right. Let the noise swirl around that, not the other way around." She nodded, then smiled, small but real. "Real strength doesn't always shout," she echoed. Braxton raised his mug in a mock toast. "But it always stands." That night, Janelle wrote something new. She didn't post it online. She didn't frame it. She just tore a page from her notepad and stuck it next to the drawing on her fridge. To every woman who stood still when the world expected her to scream, your silence didn't mean surrender. It meant strength, the kind they never saw coming. Sunday came quietly. No news crews, no interviews, no trending hashtags. Just the kind of morning Janelle Brooks had always wanted. Slow, warm, unremarkable. The boys were in the backyard, taking turns jumping off a tree stump and pretending they were astronauts launching into space. Their laughter echoed to the open windows of the kitchen, mixing with the faint clink of ceramic as Janelle rinsed out a single coffee mug in the sink. Outside, the Arizona sun was just beginning to climb high enough to kiss the porch, warming the railings and softening the chill that lingered in the wood. Braxton Wells sat on the steps, polishing a pair of old boots with quiet focus. They were scuffed and worn, the kind of boots that had marched across continents, through jungles and deserts, carrying not just a soldier, but a man who bore entire teams on his shoulders. He didn't say much. He never did when things were finally still. Janelle dried her hands on a dish towel and stepped out to join him. For a moment, they didn't speak. Just shared the silence the way warriors might share a campfire after a battle. Not to discuss it, but to honor it. "You ever think about why I never joined the military?" she asked eventually, leaning against the porch rail beside him. Braxton looked up, squinting into the sun. "Thought you just didn't want to." She shook her head. "I didn't, but not because I was scared." He waited. "I saw what it made you," she said. "Strong, respected, always watching every angle in a room, always ready." He nodded slowly. "But I want to be a different kind of strong," she continued. "The kind that heals, that tells someone the truth, even when it hurts, that walks into chaos and says, 'I'm here to help.'" Braxton didn't respond right away. He just looked down at the boots in his lap and buffed the leather with the edge of the rag. "You chose a different battlefield," he said finally. She smiled. "I didn't expect the fight to follow me to a gas station." His eyes lifted to hers. It always follows us. That's why we don't stop preparing. She crossed her arms. I hate that the boys are going to see this world for what it really is. They will, he said, but they'll also see how their mama stood tall, how she never cracked, never apologized for existing. Janelle turned her gaze toward the yard. The twins were now racing in circles around the stump, their shouts blurring into each other. Giddy, unaware, free. I just want them to know it's okay to ask for help, she said, that it's not weakness, that strength doesn't mean silence. Braxton gave a quiet nod. That's a lesson even grown men forget. The porch creaked as she shifted her weight. The wind picked up slightly, pushing a single yellow leaf across the wooden floorboards between them. You know what really stuck with me that night? She asked. Braxton raised an eyebrow. When I called you, you didn't ask what happened. You didn't ask if I was overreacting. You didn't second guess me. You just said, I'm on my way. He looked over. Steady? That's all you needed to hear. She smiled softly. Yeah, it was. That evening, after the boys were tucked in, after the dishes were washed and the house quieted again, Janelle sat alone at the kitchen table. No laptop, no phone, just a yellow notepad and a pen. She wasn't a writer, never claimed to be, but tonight, something inside her needed to come out. She began writing, not for the news, not for the sheriff, not for the internet, but for the ones like her, for the ones still standing, to the women who are tired but still show up, to the men who carry too much without complaint, to the parents who teach strength without anger, to the daughters who hold their breath when they see flashing lights in the rearview mirror. I see you. It doesn't always take shouting to be heard. Sometimes just being still and steady is loud enough. And if no one's come for you yet, call them. The right people show up, even if they come quietly. She folded the note, walked to the refrigerator, and stuck it up with the same magnet that held Marcus's drawing. Two sides of the same truth, a child vision of safety, and a woman's quiet legacy of defiance. On Monday, the news cycle shifted. A local football scandal, a housing bill protest in the state capitol. The video faded from the trending list, but not from Dry Creek. At Wilma's Diner, the regulars still brought it up. At Cascade Memorial, nurses still passed her a little slower, a little gentler. At the sheriff's department, two names remained under internal review. One officer had already requested reassignment. The other's silence in meetings had become a presence all its own. And at the Shell station, Jasper still worked nights. Every now and then, someone would stop him for gas and say, "You're the kid from the video, right?" He'd nod, say yeah, then keep ringing up Doritos and gas receipts like it was just another Tuesday. Change didn't roll in like thunder. It didn't announce itself with headlines or marches. It arrived quiet, wearing scrubs, driving a tired sedan, standing alone at a gas pump, until someone came, not with rage, but with presence, with memory, with truth. Janelle never asked the world to change in a day. She just asked it to start, with one woman, one night, one line in the sand. And it did, because real legacy doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It stands still and is impossible to ignore. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you feel seen, heard, or reminded you that strength comes in many forms, don't keep it to yourself, like this video, to show support. Share it so someone else standing alone tonight knows they're not invisible. Subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that echo long after the screen fades. Because the world changes one voice, one truth, one witness at a time. Let yours be one of them.